everyone, and welcome to Uplifting Impacts Podcast. I'm Deanna Singh, founder and chief change agent with Uplifting Impact. And I am so excited to be hosting you today as we get to do a deeper dive into our journey of what makes this world more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive. Today, I am so excited because I'm going to be talking to Jenn Zephirin. I wanted to put that Zeph in there right away, Jen, because as we were talking about before we got on the call, my son's name is Zephaniah, so I'm so excited about your last name too. So today we're going to be talking to Jenn, and Jenn is actually at Match Group. She is the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and she is responsible for developing and implementing programs to achieve Match Group's diversity goals. Now, she has done a lot of things before coming into this role. She most recently served as the diversity and inclusion business partner for technology at Uber Technologies. And prior to that, she was a private DEI consultant for brands like Unilever and the Levo Institute. She also served as Visa's director of diversity and inclusion and developed their first leadership development program for underrepresented communities. And I love this. She actually helped Visa put together their first appearance in San Francisco's Pride Parade. Now she is in her hometown, Brooklyn, New York, and we are so excited to have her on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And don't fret, there are actually a few people in the world who refer to me as Zen Jen, so that's okay.
I just had to get that Z out there. My children are always like, there's Zephaniah and Zion, and they're always like, we don't meet people who have Z's in their names. So I think I was just, that's that mom in me. So, Jen, one of the things we like to ask our guests is, what brings you joy? Like, what is something that makes you smile?
Initially, just meeting you here. So something that makes me smile. Shoes. So if I'm gonna be honest, a gorgeous pair of shoes. But honestly, my work brings me a lot of joy. Being able to make that impact on someone's life, and especially in the past year and a half, it's been a really intense world in diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of people are maybe waking up to how DE&I affect them in the workplace and affect their teams in the workplace. But it's something I've been involved with and working in for over a decade. We won't put much more time around how much time that's been, but my work brings me joy. And even at the most stressful times, if there's one person, there's one story, there's one thank you, that somehow carries me through. Whether it's through the week, whether it's through 5 years, it doesn't matter. It just helps me, reminds me of the impact and work I'm making on the world. Aside from that, certainly a really lovely beach vacation out on, Cape Cod or Cabo San Lucas, whatever it is. But definitely the little things, whether I remember really, really early on in my career, we were working on a return to work program for moms specifically. And we were working with an external company. We had the budget, and that was fantastic. And I think it was my manager who mentioned something about the working, the other parents, right? So the spouse and I'm like, okay, well, maybe let's do a breakfast or something. And it wasn't something that was given a lot of budget or a lot of screen time, but we put together a working parents breakfast, and we had a dad come in the room, and he started to like tear up and shed tears because this was the first time, he said, that someone had asked him how he was doing in the past 4 months.
Wow.
And he's like, I've been receiving coats and I've been, you know, holding diapers and I've been doing all this, but no one has said, how are you?
Mm.
And that just said to me, okay, even if you get everything else wrong today, that person knows, like that person realizes that they exist, and that's
Yep.
because you gave some thought to this process. So that brings me joy.
I love that too, because I think so often we get into these situations where people just want to be seen. Right. And I think that that's what's so pressing to me when I try to explain to people what it feels like to be an underrepresented or marginalized person inside of a company. Like you could walk through your whole day and nobody says anything to you. Nobody
Yeah,
speaks to you. Nobody smiles at you. And those are the things that make us human, right? Those are the things that give us the motivation to show up and do, and that weighs on you. That's hard. It's hard to be always on the outside. So yeah, that intentionality and just being able to share with people, I see you, I'm here for you. I thought about you. You were
yeah,
important enough to include.
yes, that's absolutely it. And there are companies that large companies that I know of where we're in the middle of Manhattan, New York, and you go upstairs and you're still the only one, believe it or not. I've put like being in DE and like I'm the only one. And if one of my colleagues on my specific team doesn't show up, like I'm going to be the only one in that office that day. And someone passing by the desk and saying hello, or someone even just giving you the head nod,
Mhm.
and people of color, we all kind of know the head nod, especially if you're in New York. You'll often see the head nod on the subway or something like that. But that acknowledgement of "I know you know"
Yep.
is it's huge. It gets you out of that zone. So yeah, so that brings me joy.
That's awesome. That brings me joy too. And I'm so glad that you're around to do that for other people too. because it is important. It is important that people get an opportunity to be seen. That's part of being able to function. You need that recognition. So can you tell me, when we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, we talk about these big words, diversity, equity, inclusion. What does it mean to you? And why do you think it's so important? Why have you dedicated so much of your professional life and your personal life too, right? To these topics.
Um, I Very early on, it was just diversity. And then it became inclusion. And then it became diversity, equity, inclusion. Some are added belonging. And I think they're all parts of the same coin.
Mhm.
In that diversity to me means it's your experience, whether it is something that you are born with or born into. And I think about that as being a woman, being a black woman, being a black woman whose whose parents are immigrants, whose siblings are immigrants. All of those are part of my diversity.
Mhm.
And then I think of the things that I've acquired through my life, right? So the pieces that, whether it's traveling or languages you've learned, or so all of those are part of my diversity. And then when I
Mhm.
think about equity, it's about having the opportunities and having access to the opportunities, um, such that they're equal to those who are my peers. So I I in my past life, or I guess during my time as a DEI professional, I've written a book on millennials in the workforce, and I think about, and I guess I've been called a geriatric millennial is the term for folks like
I
me.
got that before too. I was actually called a grandma millennial. And I was like, is that a word? Is that a thing people say? And it was right, it
I
was 30 seconds before somebody put me on a camera. They were like, we want you to talk about being a millennial. I mean, you're like a grandma millennial, but still you can talk about it. Now we're on lights, camera. I'm like,
yes.
wait.
Oh yeah, I sent the term around to all my friends, and I said, just so you know, when we, at first we'd be like, oh, millennials, and then in writing the book writing process, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're millennials, and that was a shockwave years ago. And then I'd say within the past like 3 months, I was reading a couple of articles and like watching the news, and they're like geriatric millennials. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
Like
I didn't
I'm
know
just
that
hitting my stride here. I'm just wrapping my hands around adulting through my life. So, like, can we pump the brakes on geriatric? But anyways, like, so thinking about like that cohort, right?
Yeah.
And so have I had like equal access to the same things as everyone in this cohort has? And then, so that's like the equity piece, right?
Mhm.
And then when it comes to inclusion, like, have I had the chance to participate fully in at work or in everyday situations? And by participating fully, yes, I might be in the room. Yes, I might be part of the conversation, but are my thoughts or my perspectives being heard and valued the same way as everyone else's? Are they being acted upon? Because I often think as like people say, well, inclusion is about, do you feel like you belong? For me, and in the work that I do, and in the way that I think about inclusion, it's not just if the person feels like they belong, but if their manager
Mm.
empowers them to belong, if their company empowers them to speak up
Yeah.
and to be a part of the solutions, and not just the diversity, quote unquote diversity solutions, but part of the business
Right.
solutions. So that's how I think about DE and I.
So I
Separately.
want to go back to this book that you wrote. First of all, what's the book name?
It's called Misunderstood Millennials, the other 91%.
Yeah.
And it talks about millennials in the workforce and how, for the most part, people, especially at the time, thought as millennials being the me generation and this um, really self um, selfish and self-gratified like uh, generation. But if we actually parse it out by socioeconomic difference, that was actually only 9% of the population. There is still 91% of the population who doesn't have the option of going back home, doesn't have the option of job hopping,
Mhm.
and they're really dependent on their jobs to provide that opportunity um, of learning and development, and the reasons why they're at their job are very different from those that have a socioeconomic um, I guess longevity, and who've come from higher prosperity in their lives. So it's a different conversation, especially if you're speaking globally,
Right.
and that's kind of what the book talks about.
That's
Um,
fascinating because, like a lot of times we try to help people understand that when we're talking about diversity, people often talk about race or sexual, orientation, or they'll think about some of the identities that we talk about. There's some identities we talk about more when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. But one of the things that people sometimes forget is that there's also this whole conversation about age, even the conversation we just had a minute ago, right? Like throwing a word in, like, what do you mean when you're saying geriatric? What's the implication that you have there, right? And how these words get like used and misused as we talk about age, and how sometimes people have these perceptions, whether you're just beginning in your career or you're near retirement, right? Like that people have these perceptions of what you can and cannot do based on your age, and also what expectations they have for what they're supposed to deliver for you.
exactly, exactly. That's huge, and I find that people forget that millennials are um, are in their 40s. Like,
Yeah.
so geriatric millennials, I guess, are those who are approaching 40 and who were 40. Um, my friends forget it, right? When we're having conversations um, that we're talking about people who are
And they're living their
leaders.
life. Yeah. And they're
Yeah.
they're taking on these roles. And yeah.
And we're no longer talking about people who are just coming into the workforce. That's the Gen Z population, and that's those are people who are, still maybe one job in, maybe two jobs in, but certainly much much more junior in the workforce, probably, and that for the most part, the millennial population is well in, and they're they're the, I guess you can call it, the rubber band population
Mhm.
for the baby boomers, because they're usually their children. And
Right.
as we lose, maybe in the US alone, 10,000 baby boomers a day from the workforce, we're replacing that strength with the next highest population, which is the millennial population.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about that. And I think it is important for us to do so because again, sometimes these issues and some of the things that people are experiencing in the workplace have nothing to do with, or I shouldn't say have nothing to do with, have a lot to do with how people are perceiving their age band and whatever positive or negatives associations that they have with it, and that can be a barrier that again so many people experience and some people have had some interaction with. So we're almost at the end of our time, but I do have one other question I want to try and sneak in here.
Okay.
So what do you do when you are trying to advocate for like the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, whether we're talking about age or race or gender or sexual orientation, with a colleague who maybe doesn't value it, or somebody in the workspace that doesn't value it? What do you do to advocate for its importance in with individuals who just don't see it?
I I usually try to meet them where they are. So I'm not going to. So if someone's kind of in this more polarized point of view where every everything falls into um, my way or the other way, which is a bad way, I I don't start talking to them about acceptance and adaptation, right? I start talking to them about, okay, yes, there are parts of your perspective that make absolute sense, but let's think about um, where we can find common ground across the board. So meeting them at a place where there are commonalities across different cultures, and as you said before, right, cultures can be, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's your age cohort, whether it's the fact that you're a shoe addict, like those are all parts of your
We should tell the
culture.
audience we had a whole conversation about shoes
About shoe
and
addiction.
wearing shoes again, because
Yes.
now we're coming back out into the world a little bit more.
Yes. And there's a whole other podcast
A
that could
whole
be
other
had about
podcast
that.
with it.
Um, like, yeah, full 20 minutes worth at least. But yeah, so like talking to someone and saying, yes, your perspectives may seem and may be right for you, but for people coming from other perspectives, these are other things that make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And right, they make sense for you too, right? And trying to build that part of it, and then letting that sink in for a little while, and then eventually going to a place of, okay, so if they make sense for you and we're now at a common ground, well, okay, so this person makes sense. So we've agreed on that. But now they do have a little bit of a different perspective. And here is why.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe their perspective is because of the different culture they're growing up in, or the different culture that they've been exposed to. So maybe it's interesting to try to get to know that different culture, or try to understand why people react the way they react. If you don't have to agree with it, just understanding why they do that and build a curiosity there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I start to build that advocacy part for it. I don't try to jump in and says, well, you should believe and you should. There's no one has to do anything except for pay taxes and die. And technically not everyone pays taxes, as we're learning. So we just kind of want to get to a place where we open people's eyes to that there are different perspectives, and getting there.
Yeah. Let's figure out a way to get there together. Well, this has been just awesome. It's been so awesome to get to hear you share some of these ideas more, to get to know you better. I know that our audience is probably wondering how they can get connected. So what's the easiest way for them to stay connected to all the things that you're doing?
So I have to say, as a geriatric millennial, I am a Facebooker. I am getting up on Instagram. I am, but you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn is the best place to reach me. That is definitely where I'm most available.
Awesome.
And where I'm on at least every day. So
fantastic. So what we'll do is we'll make sure we put all those links. And so you can find Jenn in all the places where she's active, and you can follow her work. We are so glad, and we're just so thankful for you being here. So thank you very much for your time today. And to all of you who are listening, we're so glad that you were able to join in for this week's episode of Uplifting Impacts podcast. We all believe that we need to have more people up there uplifting the impact. And in order to do that, we're asking that you would consider sharing this information and sharing this episode and commenting on it on our website at upliftingimpact.com. You can always provide your thoughts. We're always curious to hear what you think. And please feel free to share those with us on the website, or share those with us at LinkedIn. You can do that with Justin Ponder, who's our co-host and my husband, or you can do that with me, Deanna Singh. But until next week, we are so glad that you're here with us, uplifting impact. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.